Imagine having a companion not born of this world but conjured by your own mind. This is the concept of a tulpa. The story of tulpas is an adventure that unfolds in treacherous Himalayan passes, delves into forgotten kingdoms, and winds its way from Victorian parlors to the passionate corners of modern fandoms. Our story begins in 8th century Tibet, a once mighty kingdom teetering on the edge. Rebellions crackled within its borders, while the Abbasid Caliphate eyed its lands. Civil war raged in neighboring China, a chaotic inferno threatening to engulf Tibet. In the midst of this turmoil, a mere boy, barely 13, found himself thrust onto the throne. Prince Trisong Detsen. Born to a Tibetan king and a Chinese princess named Jincheng Li, the young prince found himself at the crossroads of two cultures. His mother, a devout Buddhist, brought a quiet strength and a deep spirituality into his life, a stark contrast to the often harsh realities of life at that time. This unexpected influence, sparked by an arranged political marriage, would forever shape the prince's destiny. Queen Jincheng became a champion for the Buddhist faith throughout Tibet. Chinese-style temples rose under her patronage, and Zen monks traveled from afar to share their wisdom. But a cruel twist of fate awaited. A smallpox epidemic swept the land, claiming the queen's life. In the wake of this tragedy, a pagan faction within the court seized the opportunity for chaos. Blaming the queen and her religion for the illness, they unleashed a wave of destruction, demolishing temples and forcing Buddhists into exile. This violence culminated in the assassination of Trisong Detsen's father, the king. It was in the midst of this turmoil that a young Trisong Detsen ascended the throne. Taking the throne amidst the ashes of his father's assassination, Trisong Detsen faced a divided Tibet. Trisong, determined to honor his mother's legacy and unify his kingdom, embarked on a series of strategic maneuvers to quell dissent, remove the pagan faction, and later wage a series of wars to secure his borders. Trisong Detsen enacted a bold move. He declared Buddhism the official religion, effectively making it a cornerstone of Tibetan identity. This decision wasn't just about faith, it was a calculated move to unite the populace under a shared belief system. To solidify this new foundation, Trisong invited the famed Indian Buddhist scholar Padmasambhava to Tibet. Together, they embarked on a project to establish a unique Tibetan form of Buddhism, one that would forever shape the cultural and spiritual landscape of the Himalayas. Hailing from the Swat Valley of India, Padmasambhava wasn't your average scholar. A master of tantric Buddhism, he was known for pushing boundaries and defying expectations. When the esteemed abbot of Nalanda requested his aid in a faraway land, Padmasambhava's adventurous spirit was ignited. His journey to Tibet, however, was no easy task. The very mountains themselves seemed to resist his passage. Blizzards howled, the earth rumbled with earthquakes, and floods raged. But Padmasambhava wasn't fazed. With each challenge, he faced the wrathful deities behind the chaos, not with violence, but with wisdom and unwavering compassion. He emerged from these trials not as a conqueror, but as a bridge, taming the gods and earning their respect. Finally arriving in Tibet, Padmasambhava joined forces with King Trisong Detsen. Together, they embarked on a monumental task, building Samye, the first Tibetan Buddhist monastery, and establishing the Nyingma school, the very foundation upon which Tibetan Buddhism would grow and flourish for centuries to come. The Nyingma school took a bold step, expanding the concept of the Nirmanakaya, the physical form of a Buddha. In their view, enlightened beings weren't confined to a single body. They could manifest their will and teachings in countless ways, even appearing as visions or objects in the mind. This revolutionary idea planted the seed for the fascinating concept of the Tulpa, a being entirely formed from thought. Following a prosperous reign of 4 decades, Trisong Detsen, weary but fulfilled, stepped down from the throne. He retired to the tranquil palace of Sumkar, where he eventually passed away peacefully. His legacy, however, lived on. The seeds of Tibetan Buddhism, sown during his reign, would blossom into a vibrant spiritual tradition. Padmasambhava, the enigmatic tantric master, remained by the king's side until his final days. Then, with a farewell as shrouded in mystery as his arrival, Padmasambhava vanished from Tibet. Some say he journeyed to the island paradise of Lanka, while others believe he ascended to a celestial realm. Regardless of his destination, Padmasambhava's influence on Tibetan Buddhism remained ever present, his teachings a cornerstone for generations of spiritual seekers. The concept of mental emanations might have stayed in Tibet if not for the Catholics. The arrival of Catholic missionary Ippolito Desideri in Tibet was a testament to sheer grit and determination. Dispatched by the Society of Jesus in 1712, Desideri embarked on a 4-year odyssey that would test his faith and fortitude. His voyage from Rome began on a Portuguese ship, braving hurricane winds and the constant threat of pirate attacks. After a year at sea, he reached India, only to face a new challenge: the treacherous journey north. Bandits roamed the poorly maintained roads, extending his travel to Delhi by another year. Death stared Desideri in the face when a brutal intestinal illness struck him in Kashmir. Yet, the near-death experience couldn't extinguish his resolve. Ordered to continue his mission, he embarked on a perilous winter trek across the Himalayas. Only the kindness of a Mongolian noblewoman, who allowed him to join her caravan, saved him from succumbing to the harsh mountain elements. Finally, in 1716, after a grueling 4-year journey, Desideri reached Tibet. While his arrival lacked the mythical aura of Padmasambhava, it marked the beginning of a unique chapter in the religious landscape of the region. Despite the hardships of his journey, Desideri finally secured permission to reside in Tibet. He rented a house and immersed himself in studies at the prestigious Sera monastery. There, he tackled the formidable Tibetan language and engaged in lively debates with the monks. Fueled by intellectual curiosity, he translated Buddhist texts into Latin, attempting to bridge the vast cultural and religious divide. One concept that particularly fascinated Desideri was the idea of the Nirmanakaya. However, his time in Tibet was cut short. Political maneuvering by a rival Catholic order, the Capuchins, resulted in his expulsion. Desideri spent the next several years in India, fighting the decision but ultimately receiving orders for his return to Europe. Thankfully, his journey home was a swift 6 months compared to the grueling 4 years he endured on the way to Tibet. Back in Europe, Desideri continued his crusade to return to Tibet, but fate was not on his side. After a decade of struggle, he was permanently barred from re-entering the region. Some accounts suggest he died a heartbroken man just 5 months later. Despite the tragic end, Desideri's legacy is significant. He became the first Westerner to bring back in-depth information about Tibetan Buddhism, including the concept of the Nirmanakaya. His pioneering work opened a window into a world previously unknown to the Western world. The pioneering work of these missionaries, even if fueled by a desire to convert, had a profound and unintended consequence. Their translations became the spark that ignited a firestorm of curiosity in Europe. By the 19th century, concepts like the Nirmanakaya were swirling through European spiritual circles. In 1874, amidst the rolling hills of Vermont, destiny brought together two seekers on a quest for the extraordinary. Helena Blavatsky, a charismatic Russian aristocrat and globetrotter, and Henry Steele Olcott, a lawyer and Civil War veteran with a curiosity about the paranormal, crossed paths for the first time. Their purpose? To witness the marvels of the Eddy brothers, renowned for their ability to manifest objects and messages during seances. While the Eddy brothers' act would eventually be exposed as a clever trick involving a man behind a curtain, the spark ignited between Blavatsky and Olcott was genuine. Blavatsky and Olcott found themselves united by a shared passion, syncretism. This philosophy, the merging of elements from various religions, resonated deeply with their desire to find a universal truth. Their encounter in Vermont proved to be a turning point. Just a year later, in 1875, Blavatsky and Olcott joined forces to forge a remarkable organization, the Theosophical Society, dedicated to fostering universal brotherhood, exploring the depths of comparative religion, and delving into the mysteries of the unknown. Among the many subjects that captivated the Theosophical Society was the enigmatic Nirmanakaya. Blavatsky, ever the unorthodox thinker, offered a unique interpretation. She envisioned them as advanced spiritual adepts who had made a remarkable choice. According to Blavatsky, these adepts would forego the ultimate liberation of enlightenment to remain unseen guardians on Earth. She painted the Nirmanakaya as a kind of self-made Tulpa, a being of pure thought dedicated to subtly shaping the world and aiding humanity. As time wore on, Blavatsky's health began to deteriorate. Furthermore, a series of controversies cast a shadow over her reputation, effectively forcing her into retirement. Meanwhile, within the Theosophical Society, a subtle shift was taking place. Henry Steele Olcott, the organization's president, became increasingly drawn to the depths of Buddhist philosophy, his focus gradually moving away from the purely paranormal. This left opened a window for other theosophists to delve deeper into the concept of the Nirmanakaya, reinterpreting it through their own lenses. Theosophy's journey with the concept of Nirmanakaya takes another interesting turn with Annie Besant. In 1889, a new chapter unfolded within the Theosophical Society. Annie Besant, a woman of formidable intellect and diverse experiences, entered the fold. Her past was a testament to her restless spirit, a form former evangelical Christian married to an Anglican priest. She had later embraced socialism and feminism. A chance encounter propelled her towards Theosophy. Assigned to review a book by Helena Blavatsky, Besant's curiosity was piqued. A meeting with Blavatsky proved to be a turning point. Besant, captivated by the world of Theosophy, shared her socialist past, viewing it as a stepping stone on her path to a greater truth. Rising swiftly through the ranks, Besant became a leading figure within the society. Her sharp mind and unwavering dedication would leave a lasting mark on the organization and its exploration. By 1896, Annie Besant was a leading voice within the Theosophical Society. Her keen intellect turned towards a fascinating area of study, thought forms. In an article published in the Society's journal, Lucifer, Besant described her observations. These thought forms, she argued, weren't mere figments of imagination, but rather a cloud-like substance of higher bodies. Besant's exploration went further in her book on the subject. She delved into the diverse appearances of thought forms, encompassing shapes resembling people, objects, or even entirely new creations. By the 1910s, the Theosophical Society had undergone a significant shift. With the passing of both Blavatsky and Olcott, Annie Besant assumed the mantle of leadership. However, her focus began to diverge from the exploration of the mind. Besant became consumed by the idea of a coming Messiah, a world teacher destined to usher in a new era. Believing she had identified this figure in a young Indian boy named Jiddu Krishnamurti, Besant poured her energy into nurturing him as the prophesied leader. This decision proved to be a controversial one. The society became deeply involved in promoting Krishnamurti, even establishing a dedicated organization for his training. However, Krishnamurti himself eventually rejected the messianic role thrust upon him. Besant's unwavering conviction in Krishnamurti remained unshaken until her death. Despite the internal divisions and disillusionment caused by the episode, her legacy within Theosophy remains complex and multifaceted. The concept of thought forms was then taken up by William Walker Atkinson. Atkinson was an American attorney and businessman who went through a financially challenging personal period. During that time he found solace in the New Thought movement, which emphasized the power of positive thinking. Atkinson's interest in the mind-body connection extended to the concept of auras, the energy fields surrounding living beings. He delved into the idea that occultists could potentially create thought forms, manifestations of thought projected from one's aura, that could take on a person-like appearance and even act independently. Atkinson would go on to write many books on the occult, and died peacefully in his home in Los Angeles in 1969. The story of tulpas as we know them today takes a fascinating turn with Alexandra David-Neel. A woman of remarkable versatility, David-Neel was an opera singer, a proponent of Zionism, and a vocal feminist. Her intellectual curiosity led her to the Theosophical Society in her youth, where she delved into esoteric concepts. Intrigued by Buddhism, David-Neel's interest transcended mere intellectual exploration. She converted and later embarked on a daring journey, traveling to Tibet in the early 20th century. Determined to deepen her understanding of Tibetan Buddhism, David-Neel embarked on a daring mission. Disguised as a poor monk, she braved treacherous conditions and cultural barriers to enter Lhasa, the forbidden capital city. However, her time there proved challenging. The harsh realities of life in Lhasa, far from the idealized image she envisioned, presented a significant obstacle. In 1929, David-Neel published her experiences in Tibet, introducing the concept of tulpas to a wider Western audience. She described them as thought forms imbued with sentience, created through meditation. However, there's a crucial distinction to be made. David-Neel's concept appears to be a misinterpretation of the Tibetan term tulku, which refers to the reincarnation of a lama. It's also possible that her understanding was influenced by the earlier ideas of Blavatsky and Besant regarding thought forms. Unlike the Tibetan tradition, which doesn't mention self-created sentient thought entities, David-Neel's tulpas possessed a troubling degree of free will, even requiring destruction in her account. This element likely stemmed from her exposure to the writings of figures like Besant and Atkinson. David-Neel's adventurous spirit continued to propel her throughout the 1930s. She traversed war-torn China, further deepening her understanding of Asian cultures. As World War II engulfed the globe, David-Neel found herself back in Tibet, where she remained until the war's conclusion. In her later years, she returned to France, where she passed away peacefully in 1969 at the remarkable age of 100. Despite the controversy surrounding her interpretation of tulpas, her life and work continue to spark curiosity and inspire exploration of the intersection between Eastern and Western thought. Following Alexandra David-Neel's writings, the concept of tulpas faded into relative obscurity for several decades. However, the counterculture movement of the 1960s and 1970s rekindled interest in this esoteric idea. During this period, tulpas weren't necessarily seen as sentient beings. Instead, they were often explored in the context of memory techniques like the memory palace. Here, the visualization of a tulpa served as a tool to enhance recall. By the 1980s and 1990s, tulpas had become more widely known, but were often relegated to the realm of the paranormal. They found themselves lumped in with other fantastical creatures like homunculi and golems, often portrayed in a creepy or spooky light. The arrival of the 2000s and the explosion of online message boards marked a pivotal moment for the concept of tulpas. This era witnessed the flourishing of a dedicated online community, particularly on the anonymous image board 4chan. Within this virtual space, a new vocabulary emerged to define the practice of creating tulpas. The act itself was termed tulpamancy, and those who engaged in it were known as tulpamancers. New concepts and practices also gained traction, including forcing, intensifying the creation process, wonderlands, imaginary landscapes where tulpas could reside, and soul bonding, establishing a deep connection with the tulpa. Significantly, the online discussions surrounding tulpas shifted the focus from a spiritual pursuit, as envisioned by the Theosophists, to a more materialist perspective. This new approach emphasized the potential role of biological and neurological processes in tulpa creation. By the 2010s, the growing online tulpa community began attracting the attention of researchers. Studies emerged exploring the practice of tulpamancy and its potential effects. One area of interest focused on the demographics of tulpamancers, with some studies suggesting a higher prevalence of neurodivergent individuals within the community. From its esoteric origins within Theosophy to its current exploration in online communities and scientific studies, the concept of tulpas has undergone a remarkable transformation. What began as a mystical exploration of thought forms has evolved into a multifaceted phenomenon with applications in memory techniques, online communities, and even personal well-being. The story of tulpas reminds us of the enduring power of ideas and the ever-evolving nature of human experience. As we continue to explore the frontiers of consciousness, it will be interesting to see how the concept of tulpas continues to develop in the years to come.